I'm John Paul, and a really warm welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm really delighted to be talking about the really important subject of anxiety. Anxiety, of course, fear-based, but it's about the relationship with fear and anxiety because it's a valuable thing to have, fear, isn't it? But the trouble is, if it dominates, I think, life, then in some ways, life is being dominated by fear of death or death. So such an important thing to look at. Hopefully, during this conversation, we're going to be looking at skills to sort of manage and relate to anxiety, or to make sure it's working for us rather than us being at the mercy of our fear and anxiety. In order to do that, I'm absolutely delighted to have a trained psychologist who has a huge amount of experience specifically in the subject and area of anxiety, and also in the modality of acceptance and commitment therapy, which we're going to talk about too. Her name is Patricia Esperanza Zurita Ona. Her clients give her the nickname Dr. Z. There will be Z here, but I guess Z there. She's originally from Bolivia, South America, as I say, a psychologist, particularly trained in acceptance and commitment therapy, but also cognitive behavioral therapy. Over the last 18 years, she works with all types of fear, so uncertainty and tolerance, procrastination, OCD, perfectionism, phobias, all those things that people come to therapy with, which are really all fear-based, ultimately. In 2019, she was nominated as a fellow by the Association for Contextual Behavioral Science because of her contributions in relation to ACT. She's the founder and director of the East Bay Therapy Center, which is a boutique private center in San Francisco Bay, specifically offering therapy for anyone experiencing anxiety-based struggles. In 2020, she started a newsletter called Playing It Safe. As of 2024, she has conducted more than 180 workshops at national and international conferences. In 2023, she gave a TED Talk called Stop Playing It Safe and Start Living, which has now had over 264,000 views. And in Patricia's words here, she absolutely loves her job. And she says something which I think is such an important thing, which I would wholeheartedly agree with. And of course, the reason for having this conversation as well is that she believes that learning to navigate fear-based reactions is one of the key skills of the 21st century, and she's very passionate about it. Patricia, thank you so much for coming on, and welcome.
John Paul, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be having this conversation with you. I have seen all the amazing work you're doing with your channel and all the skills you're disseminating, and it's really special to be having this conversation about anxiety together.
Fantastic. Thank you. As I say, so glad to have you. I mean, perhaps we could just start by you telling us what your understanding of anxiety is. It would be a word that's used all the time by people who's very much come into, along, I suppose, with depression and trauma and various other words, come into everyday language. But how would you characterize it?
That's a great starting point for our conversation, right? When we think about fear-based reactions, fear is an emotional state that is focused on the present. I am afraid that there is an earthquake in this moment. I'm afraid someone is going to break into my house. I'm afraid I'm going to make a fool of myself. So fear is a present emotion, and anxiety is an extension of fear, but it's focused on the future. What if John Paul doesn't like me? What if no one reads my books? What if no one invites me to the party next week? So I think it's helpful for people to distinguish between fear and anxiety. Fear is an emotional state focused on the present. Anxiety is an emotional state focused on the future. But all of them are ways in which our mind is trying to protect us from something terribly happening, from someone rejecting us, from a terrible outcome happening. That's what we think of anxiety as these what if thoughts of something terribly catastrophic could happen to me or to the people we love. Most of the times, people say, I'm very, very stressed. People usually use the term, I'm very, very stressed. However, when you unpack what they're really going through, you will understand that they're dealing more with anxiety. It's not just a stress. There is a physiological experience of anxiety. A lot of people experience butterflies in their stomachs, shakiness on their hands, their legs, their heart is beating fast, and they usually label that that's a stress. But what happens is that if you ask them what they are thinking and you unpack a little bit that, you will hear a lot of catastrophic thoughts about something happening in the future. So that's at the core of anxiety. There is a physiological experience that we all have, but there is also this understanding of that experience as the sign, as the cue that something awful is going to happen in the future. So even though anxiety is it's a very common struggle for all of us, it's part of our human experience, it's part of being alive, we have been told that it's really a bad thing. And somehow we think that it's okay to say I'm stressed, but in fact, we're dealing with anxiety much more often than we can acknowledge many times, so that we know this. So I love that question. I love that question.
I think an important thing that's coming through with what you're saying as well is that it is, as was said, it's a part of all human beings, isn't it? And there's an important reason that it's there for us. I suppose the kind of what ifs about life and what if that does go wrong, it fundamentally is protective, isn't it? I saw someone, he's done an animation about anxiety, and it's very much about what we'll talk about with acceptance and commitment therapy and having a relationship with that part, rather than trying to excise it or get rid of it, because fundamentally it's part of human experience and can be a valuable part. But in that animation, he calls it watchfulness. That so in some ways, of course, anxiety has got this terrible press, hasn't it? It's nobody wants to be thought of as an anxious person. It's a negative word in some ways, anxiety. But I think if you look at it from a safety, protective, that kind of watchfulness, in that it is trying to take care of you, and as you say, the people that you love and all those things, I think that enables a different relationship to be had with it.
It is true. We have received so many messages, especially in that culture of having good feelings all the time, that anxiety is bad, that you have to get rid of it, that you shouldn't be anxious, that to be happy is not to have anxiety. The challenge is that is not consistent with our human experience, with our everyday lives, that is not consistent with behavioral science. In fact, if every time we experience anxiety, we have to wear, hypothetically speaking, a red hat, we wouldn't go 1 hour without seeing everyone around us wearing the red hat, right? That's how common it is. And in this culture of feeling good, we also have been told that we should be able to control all types of things. And certainly, if the room is too cold, I am going to turn on the heater. If it's too hot, I'm going to turn the air conditioner. If you tell me the light is too bright, I'm going to go and turn off the light. So we have been told that we should be able to control many things, as we're able to do that with some external aspects, but we don't have control of our internal experience. And there are thousands of things around us that we cannot control. But these messages about that we can control things have been translated into anxieties, worries, and fears. And we have been told that we have to control them, push them down. You should be fearless, right? But all those messages actually are so harmful, because eliminates one aspect of our experience, a very important aspect, but also eliminates that the cavemen and the cave women couldn't survive without having some form of anxiety, some form of fear, some form of worry, right? That it actually has kept us alive, evolutionarily speaking, through hundreds and hundreds of years. The cavemen and the cave women, they needed to anticipate what could go wrong if they chase that path. Do they have enough resources? Is there a potential enemy there? Is there a predators? And they also needed to keep track of what went wrong in the past. That's how rumination, which is another sister of anxiety, comes, right? So all these methods that say that you should get rid of anxiety are really eliminating evolution, social evolution, and they're eliminating that this is part of our human experience. The beauty of acceptance and commitment therapy, it's really understanding how, as a human beings, we are containers of all types of internal experiences, thoughts, images, hypotheses, memories, dreams. Some of them are uncomfortable, some of them are completely painful, but the goal is to learn to have them without acting on them, right? So it's a very different message. The message within acceptance and commitment therapy has nothing to do with the idea that to be happy, you should control those experiences. It's actually the opposite. To have a joyful life, to have a richful life, you need to learn to manage and make room for all the stuff that comes under your skin lean into it, and then choose what matters to you with your feet, your hands, and your mouth. So it's a very different relationship, as you're saying, that we try to teach our clients, and we live in our life with our own fears, worries, and stressors.
Mm. You just said there, sorry, Patricia, did you say your hands and mouth? What you then, so we have this experience, passing thoughts, passing feelings, and the difference between that and engaging in a particular behavior is important in acceptance and commitment therapy. But you said something about hands and mouth there. What was that because of
Yeah.
behavior? That what you do with your hands or mouth is turning something into a behavior.
Yes, yes. And thank you for clarifying. I think it's a very interesting expression, right? To be doing something with your feet, your hands, and your mouth. Yes.
I
But yeah, it's
haven't
a
heard
very interesting.
Okay.
Yeah,
I like it though. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so the idea within acceptance and commitment therapy is that from the moment we open our eyes to the moment we fell asleep, we will have all types of feelings, memories, bodily sensations. So there are all types. Some of them are comfortable, some of them are uncomfortable. And the goal, one of the goals is to develop a relationship that embraces psychological flexibility. Psychological flexibility basically means learning to make room for all that stuff and choose how you're going to behave in the world in front of you, how you're going to show up to the person in front of you, how I am going to show up to this conversation.
Mhm.
And showing up means engage in a particular way of behaving with our feet, our hands, and our mouth. It's not with how I am feeling, right? It's learning to say, here's the feeling, here is the anxiety, here is my heart beating fast, and
Mm.
here is this thing that matters to me.
Mm.
So, what is the values based action I can do in this moment? So, that's why we translate everything into a behavior based, into a way of being, into taking action, as we will say within that.
Great. Okay, so we'll get into detail with some of the sort of techniques of acceptance and commitment therapy. It did remind me when you were saying that sometimes when people are talking about what they think, they will feel ashamed of a thought for some human beings.
Yeah.
And I always think, well, firstly, you haven't said it if you're looking at the mouth, isn't it? It is, we have 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day, is my understanding of things.
I know. It's incredible.
A nervous system, an internet, a complex world. People are going to be thinking all kinds of things, aren't they, all the time? An amount they will deliberately be thinking, but probably the majority is just thoughts coming in from that we're compelled to think, or from the fear part or the drive part. So yeah, I would hear that quite a lot. I feel terrible about having that thought. It's almost as if you've had the thought, you've done it or said it, which is it. And I think it's interesting. There's something very much about acceptance and commitment therapy, which is putting a buffer between those two things, that you can think something. And then, as you said, in terms of values, what behavior are you going to be engaging in? And is that consistent with your values? What is important to you?
I appreciate the reference you're making, acknowledging that we have busy minds, right? Our mind never stops. It's all the time, blah, 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 chop, 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 yap, 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 right? Our minds don't take breaks, don't take holidays, don't take summer vacations. Our mind is always going on. And the mind has basically two functions. One is to generate content. That's what the mind has to do. It's
Mhm.
always going to be coming up with something. And the second one is to protect us.
Yeah.
Now, this is what we know today. But what happens before? In the past, we have been told that we are defined by our thoughts, that because I think, therefore I exist. That's what Descartes mentioned, right? And the challenge, like all those messages, have somehow give so much power to our thinking, right? It's like, because I think so, if I have a terrible image about an earthquake happening in 10 months, it's going to happen. It could happen, right? For some people, that's how anxiety shows up. They believe every single thing their mind tells us. If I am going to a party, people won't include me. I will be rejected. They will make fun of me. They hold on to that as the absolute truth.
Mm.
So that is something that is uniquely different from acceptance and commitment therapy. If I can break down a little bit, the ACT acronym stands for acceptance and commitment therapy, but the A stands for really for embracing a radical acceptance of every internal experience you have through. We're not saying that you should like and love, when your heart is beating fast, that you have butterflies in your stomach, that you should love those thoughts that, I am worthy, I am unlovable. But we're saying that when you learn to open up, make room to all those internal experiences, you liberate yourself from all that controlling you're doing and spending all your time trying to block that feeling or suppress that thought, right? So when you learn to accept, you give yourself the freedom to experience life as it is. You don't need to love those internal experiences, but you are not wrestling with those feelings any longer. You learn to say yes to the yucky feeling that comes with anxiety. Yes to your mind telling you, oh my gosh, no one is going to listen to this podcast, right? So you learn to say yes to all those uncomfortable experiences. The commitment part, acceptance and commitment therapy, the commitment part refers to really choosing what matters to you in your life, choosing who you want to be in your relationships, as a parent, as a coworker, that role you want to have in your community, how you want to relate to your spiritual or religious life. It's about understanding that you have the capacity to choose what matters to you in an individual level, right? And the T, taking action, basically means translating your values into actionable steps. This is not about jumping off the cliff and if you're anxious, jumping into the pool, right? It doesn't matter how big or small the action you take. What is more important is that it's an intentional action to show up as the person you want to be. It's not just a therapy model. It's a way of being in the world. It's a way of relating to your mind and to your stories in a more compassionate, gentle way that allows you to really ask yourself this question: who do I want to be in the world? How do I want to show up to this person in front of me? How do I want to show up to my own fears? How do I want to show up when my heart is beating fast? How do I want to show up when I'm having a hard conversation with the person I love? How do I want to show up when I am scared of loneliness? So all that has been extremely powerful in my personal life and in the clinical work I do with clients, right? And what I can tell people listening to us is that once you start doing what matters to you in your everyday life, from the moment you open your eyes to the moment you fell asleep, and you experience that, and you observe what comes with you making a values-based choice, there's no other way to go back to other behaviors. You may get triggers where we're going to get triggered all the time. But when you experience meaning and purpose in your everyday life, not just on the big decisions, it's an incredible shift in the quality of your life. And I think from that place, there is this cascade effect into your relationships, your work, how you relate to other areas of your life, right? Relating to my mind in a way that it doesn't define me. It's a way to watch when my mind is telling me this classic old stories. You suck. No one is going to read your books. This is going to be so bad. You're a terrible therapist. Stepping back from the story and watch it. Watch and watch it, letting it be.
When you say sort of stepping back and looking at what's happening, observing, I think a lot is made of fighting something internally, isn't it? It was interesting you said about ACT with depression and addictions. A lot of people say, well, you need to fight addictions, you need to fight depression, fight your anxiety. And I think that's a fundamental difficulty with things, isn't it? Because you're splitting yourself off from something effectively there, and it results in so much internal conflict, which is a huge use of somebody's thought, feeling, and behavioral energy conflict, isn't it? Why probably people ruminate and procrastinate as well, because they're conflicted all the time, that internal argument. So there's something very much about acceptance and commitment therapy, along with other modalities as well, isn't it? That it's that we don't fight it, but also the other element of values, which is incredibly important, I think, is that a lot of our values and the reasons we make the decisions we make have come externally from people, haven't they? And we're very much shaped during primary school, secondary school by our external environment. Our brains are made to do that and make choices often based on what other people tell us is important. And I think that's why the values part of this is is key, as whether it's anxiety, depression, addictive behavior. It's very important to look at values, isn't it? Because most of what we're doing it in accordance with something, some values, but they're probably not ours. So I think that, so what is authentically, who are we? What is important to us? And I suppose that can change throughout life as well. Might change from teenage years to somebody's 20s to somebody's 30s. So I think values is a key thing, whatever symptom somebody's coming into therapy for, actually.
Yeah, it's really powerful, right? I think that is in that, specifically when thinking about anxiety, that has been, it's an extremely skilled, right? So I will try to answer your question to the best I can. So please
Sure.
bear with me. Please bear with me. What is important here is that one of the things we have found, and research has been very clear about this, is that when we invite people to tap into values, into what matters to us, them, into what gives them meaning, that act as an intrinsic motivation. That is
Mm.
so powerful because we all are trying to have good lives. We don't wake up with the intention to have a miserable life,
Mm.
right? We wake up, we really want to make the best of our lives. So when we teach people what matters to them and remove all the noise that comes with that, they are more willing to take actions that are consistent with your values.
Mm.
So here is a short example I can share from the many clients I have worked with, and also from my own experiences with anxiety. Um, when I was giving the TEDx talk, that was the most anxiety provoking I have done in my life. Like
Okay.
brutal anxiety, right? I basically had 1 month to prepare to give this talk. And the process is quite rigorous because they're going over your script, they're going over the reference, they're doing fact checking because they're protecting the quality of this TEDx talk.
Mm.
And you only have one chance to rehearse on the setting, and that's it. So imagine condensing many ideas in 17 minutes, right? You have everything's to do. I have an accent, so I have to practice some words to say so they are, understandably for people. But it's such a vulnerable experience. And of course, my mind was telling me things like, Patricia, you will make a fool of yourself. Maybe you shouldn't do it. Maybe this is too much for you. Um, Classic thoughts that my mind has told me many times, right? Every time I'm writing a book, my mind tells me the same thing. No one is going to read this book. This is going to be the end of your career when the book gets published. So that's what the mind does. So
Mm.
with acceptance, I have learned to notice those thoughts. I sometimes give them a name, I imagine like little ghosts there on my shoulder. I say, oh, these catastrophic thoughts, right? Or these cranky thoughts. I don't fight against them. I don't have to prove anything, but I acknowledge, I say, here's my mind telling me X. But then I ask myself, what is really important? Why is it important for me to give this TEDx talk? And the truth is that I fundamentally believe disseminating skills that can be life transformative in our life,
Mm.
especially in a times in which all types of things are happening in the world. In the information era, not only there is a lot of misinformation about all types of things, but there's a lot of misinformation about mental health. And we're also exposed to all type political situations that are, make us scared, right? The cultural field is embracing in many ways. So managing our fears and teaching the skills to do that is a big value of mine, right? This is what I write books. This is what I give podcasts. So when I ask myself, Patricia, what really matters about giving this TEDx talk? It's because I do believe in disseminating what could be helpful to people.
Mhm.
But when I say, yes, I believe on this is important to me, it also means that I have to say yes to the experience of anxiety that comes. It also means that I have to say yes when I walk into the podium and you see like 10 cameras brightening your life that you cannot see, right? You say yes to that. You take a deep breath, you regroup yourself, and then you start. Um, if I wasn't clear about my values, it will be easy to say no. It's too much. It's too much. What I'm going to do is such an anxiety-provoking situation. No, but it's the values that anchor my behavior of giving a TEDx talk.
Mhm.
If I'm working, and this is from the work I do with many clients as a therapist and coach, it's very easy sometimes for us to tell people you should face your fears. You should approach your fears, right? That's the way to go. But it's a very scary thing. It's a
Mm,
very scary thing. But
mm,
it's very different if my client is afraid of driving on the freeway or afraid of driving on the bridge, on the Bay Bridge. If I tell my client, will it be worth it for you to feel what you have to feel when driving on the Bay Bridge so you can see your mother who is getting a medical treatment in the hospital?
mhm,
Or will it be worth it for you to drive on the freeway so you can go to visit your best friend who just delivered has a baby?
mm,
So that's the values, right? There is something about when we have this values component that really helps people to experience what really matters to them. And they are willing to take actions in the service of their values.
mhm,
And of course, there are many, many exercises that we do to help people to identify their values, right?
mm,
And as you say, very well say, John Paul, in our life, right? Um, Different areas of our life are going to take precedent. Sometimes we focus more for certain time on parenting. Sometimes we focus more on career, right? And then we experience what we call, between quotes, values conflict. There is an evening that you have to go to see your kids' performance, but you also have this meeting at work or this podcast interview to do. What are you going to do? In reality, it's not a values conflict because you care about things. You care about what you're doing with your podcast, and you also care about showing up to your kid. So it's about learning that in life, we cannot do it all. We cannot show up to every single thing in the way we hope. So we learn to say yes to something that matters to us. And we also learn to say no to something that matters to us as a values-based choice instead of trying to hustle, right? And saying, I will do from 5 to 10, then I will just drive to the podcast interview, right? So values is really like a compass in our lives that help us to relate to our fears in a more compassionate way. And it also helps us to relate to the world, to all the ongoing external pressures we get from the world about what's the right thing to do.
mhm,
There is no right or wrong thing to do when you're acting from your values. When you really check and you say, in this moment in my life, this is
mm.
what is important to me. So that's a very different conversation in therapy, right? It's not just about go and face your fears and power through them and face them, right? It's about let's just step back. Let's step back. How are you relating to your mind? What really matters to you? Someone invite me to a party, like, oh my gosh, I don't have anyone to go. I shouldn't go, right? The avoidance kicks in, right? So art is really about understanding the many ways in which we're trying to control anxiety by doing all types of things, private and external things, and to really check the workability of that. How is really working in your life? Is it expanding it or is it shrinking?
Mhm.
And then ask the question of values, who you want to be in this world.
Mm.
And are you willing to say yes, the acceptance spirit in the service of your values and what will give you meaning?
Yeah, completely. And it's sort of very striking, isn't it? If you're looking at fear dominating or anxiety, in some ways that's using the imagination to take something apart, isn't it? Find problems, identify problems, amplify the importance of problems, imagine problems. But what you're saying about values and what's important to you, and when you said crossing that bridge, what's it going to be like to see your mother? What will she feel? What will you feel? It's somebody using their imagination to create, isn't it? And to create in a way that's going to help them to feel love or joy or excitement, the kind of things that we want to be motivated by. I mean, fear is a motivator to a degree, isn't it? But
Yeah.
people will burn out and be in a lot of distress if their primary motivator is fear. We want our motivators, I think, also to be those emotions of that take us towards something. And I think, yes, that what you described is very much encouraging somebody to use their imagination to create something, isn't it? To imagine what it would be like to feel that. I mean, I might often ask somebody the question, who inspires you? Because
Mm-hmm.
very much, I think, says something about somebody's values as well, doesn't it? You know, what's important to you, who inspires one person is going to be different to the person next to them. But it's very much, again, all saying something about what somebody wants to bring to the world. And again, it's engaging that part of it, or engaging the imagination to create. and to work towards something. One of the things I like about acceptance and commitment therapy is this balance of ease and effort. So there is very much about the sort of being. It helps with more rest, but it's also about the becoming, which I think is a really,
Yes.
really helpful balance for human beings to be thinking about both of those parts at different times as well. We want to be able to rest. We want to be able to be and be at ease. And we also want to be able to be thinking, what do I want to create? What do I want to be working towards? And I think that's captured within
Yeah.
acceptance and commitment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautifully said. There is the process of becoming
Mm.
without accepting who we are, right? There is the process. I think that's a beautiful point you're making. I think um, I'm pausing because I have a long response and a short response. I'm trying to see which direction I go. I think the process of becoming within this model, with this way of thinking of act, it's about every single action step based on your values. It helps in the becoming, right? It's guiding the becoming process.
Mhm.
But the becoming process doesn't mean eliminating all the stuff that our mind has told us historically. The process of becoming comes with taking values-based actions without saying those stories won't pop up. The
Sure.
process of becoming means, like, as you're driving, right, the story will kick in. There is an act metaphor, you may have read about it, the bus metaphor, in which basically you imagine that you are the driver. You
Mhm.
just have a bus, and then you're the driver of the bus, and the passengers are all the fears that you have. Fears about rejection, fears about not being good enough, fears about having a panic attack. And the idea here is that when you're driving, when you're in the process of becoming, you're driving this bus, carrying all these anxieties within you,
Mm.
right? But learning to be there without acting on them. So that the most common things that we do with anxiety across the board, whether a person is dealing with social anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder, perfectionist, phobias, is that when anxiety comes a strong feeling, we try to suppress it. All what they are doing is prolonging the anxiety,
Mhm.
right? That's not acceptance. That's just fighting the acceptance in another way, right? But I think we're always living towards values, knowing that it is not going to mean that we don't experience some anxiety and some noise. It's really about doing what is important in the moment while having these feelings. This process of becoming you are describing, which I absolutely love, it's
Mhm.
about becoming a person who we are meant to be, who
Mm.
we're striving to be,
Mm.
while carrying with us as passengers in our bus all
Mhm.
these fears, these worries with anxieties, right? And that is where the acceptance comes. It's really about acknowledging that the process of becoming also means accepting who we are in the world. And to my clients, I tell them that there is nothing broken when you having a brain that is prone to scan for what's going to go wrong.
Sure.
That's how it is,
Mm.
right? It's a very compassionate response. We don't have to pretend to be this cool like a cucumber people, right? Like very fresh like a lettuce, right? It is true. I think when we look at the literature, and there's so much to say, there are some people who are more prone to experience anxiety, which means they're going to be walking in the streets with a brain that is scanning for threat. But do I want to live my life? Do I want to organize my time around the possibility of things that could go wrong? In the
Mm.
future, possibilities that haven't happened, and then organize my life. That will be hard for me, but that's what a lot of people with anxiety do, right?
Mm. Very
They
much.
they play it safe. They play
Yeah.
it safe,
I
right?
think the behavior that goes with anxiety and fear is avoidance generally, isn't it? So if we fear something, we'll generally avoid it and life can just get smaller and smaller, sort of ever decreasing circles. And I suppose we keep ourselves safe, potentially physically, but actually it's doing the opposite psychologically and therefore probably physically for people, isn't it? With the impact that our mental health and psychological health have on our physical well-being, to make life smaller, to isolate ourselves more, to avoid all and any risk is only going to aggravate people's difficulties, isn't it, or cause difficulties for people. But as you say, with
Yeah,
with
yeah,
anxiety in the
that's
bus,
true.
fears in the bus, we are wired to do it, aren't we? It's intrusive, we're compelled, and maybe it can be a helpful thing sometimes to act in accordance with the fear, to listen to it, isn't it? It's just, I think our natural tendency as human beings is to listen too much, is to amplify it too much, is to give it too much importance, isn't it?
That's right. That's right. To your point, for example, I took my friend's daughters for an outing on a Sunday, and they're two little ones. They're like 5 and 7 years old.
Mm.
And the moment I'm walking on the street, I see a car driving super fast. Right? Of course, I get scared, right? It's a fear-based response in the moment because I don't want them getting hurt. So I quickly go and grab the two of them, right? And just pull them aside, right? That's a fear-based response, very adaptive, very, very, very adaptive, right? If I am having a job interview in a new place, in a new area I'm not familiar with, I may try to drive by the location one day before because I don't want to be late. I don't want to, miss up that. It's a fear-based response, very adaptive response. So to your point, we really have to say that not all fear-based responses are wrong. They actually can be very, very adaptive, right? Can be very adaptive. The challenge is when these fear-based responses or anxious-based responses go unchecked and then take a life on its own. And a life that is going to be shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, right? So I think being afraid is the norm, not the exception. How we relate to our fears? I ask my clients, what is driving the decision you're making right now? Is it fear? Is it fear that something could go wrong, that you could be rejected, that people will see how incompetent you are? Or is it the value of putting your work out there? Or is the value of sharing something that you think could be helpful to people? So that reflective question is super important because anxiety makes us be reactive. We feel anxious. I have to do something about this right now to calm this anxiety, right? I have to meditate 20 hours right now, right? I have to go to therapy 5 sessions a week, right? Anxiety comes with this whoosh feeling that you have to do something. But we want to be careful in life. We have to check those responses in the context of our life. I think reflecting about what's really driving this for me, right? What is really, really doing this for me? Is it a fear-based response or is it a values-based response? So because it really can create a different path and a different choice.
Definitely. And then the nice thing as well there is an awareness of choice, isn't it? We are compelled often in terms of fear. It's very compelling, isn't it? It's intrusive. We are programmed to believe it, wired to struggle, or programmed to survive rather than to be happy, all those things. And I think that idea that gets introduced is that you have a choice over this, actually. They're all passing bits of human experience, and you can choose which part you take hold of and act on. And I think it's a wonderful concept to introduce, isn't it? And a lot of people we're going through our lives as human beings, totally understandably, in terms of our environments and our biology, not experiencing that choice at all. And I think one of those reasons is that fear is so compelling. If it's happening in our imagination, it's happening, isn't it? And it's such a powerful physiological response for people that I can really see why we believe it.
But when people have a lot of fears, of course, it feels so real. It feels so real, right? Just so embedded in their everyday life, right? The challenge here, or the skill that we try to teach clients, is to look at the workability. The workability of acting directly in your life on those fears, anxieties, and worries. Does it expand your life? Does it shrink your life, right? Because I think you're right. When my mind tells me, Patricia, no one is going to read this book, it's so loud. It is so loud. Right? But if I listen to the thought, I will stop writing. What we have to check is if you act on those fears, do they work in the service of taking you closer to who you want to be or not? It's a very simple response, right? We don't have to overthink it. When you act on fear, does it help you to take you closer to your values of disseminating, the values of being caring, or does it take you farther away? So, for example, in the example I did, I'm walking on the street and I see these two little girls getting close to this car that is driving fast. I grab them quickly. That is a fear-based response because I don't want them to have an accident. In that context, it is consistent with my value of protecting these little beings.
Completely. I can see
Right? So sometimes fear-based responses are consistent with our values. Fear necessarily is not the enemy, it's part of our life, but it can shrink our life or it can expand our life. So I think it's helpful to clarify that for your audience. We're not saying that fear is really bad. We're saying that sometimes can lead to adaptive responses and sometimes not. And that's what we like to talk about, flexibility, right? Psychological flexibility means responding to the world in front of me and responding to the world inside of me in a way that helps me to be who I want to be in the world, right? Watching the mind means acknowledging that your mind, again, is a content generating machine. It will come up with all types of thoughts, blah, 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 chop, chop, chop. But it's also a protective device. My mind is not my enemy. It just happens that my mind sometimes gets scared. And when we get scared, it tells me all types of things. So whatever you're doing, whatever you're considering doing, whatever decision you're thinking about making, let's step back and let's watch the mind. What does the mind tell you? The mind is telling you blah, 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 blah. And usually the mind is going to tell you a lot of catastrophic thoughts. Terrible things are going to happen, right? That's when the mind goes. And that's really the bias of anxiety, right? Tell us things are going to be bad. But the thing we have to acknowledge what the mind is going to tell us. And guess what? Because we know that the mind is going to tell us terrible things happening. It's going to tell us someone is going to reject you or you're going to cause harm to this relationship. You may want to know this and name those experiences. That's another skill. First skill, observe the mind. Watch the mind with whatever it comes. No judgment. Watch the mind. The second skill, notice and name those internal experiences. Notice and naming your internal experiences means saying things like, I am noticing butterflies in my stomach. I'm noticing my heart is shrinking right now. I'm noticing difficulties of breath. I notice my mind is telling me I'm going to make a fool of myself. If you want to be playful, you can even give names to those thoughts. Like sometimes I call my fears cranky Patricia, right? Because some rules have been broken, like cranky Patricia is there. Or I say sometimes to my fears about like the doubting fears. Here come the doubting fears about that this book is not going to go well, the podcast is not going to go well, this interview will suck, right? So I have to know this and name those feelings, and you can capture them by a theme. So notice and name the internal experiences and check the most important thing. That's another skill. Ask yourself, what matters to me in this moment? So psychological flexibility means really looking, if I engage in this action, what is going to be? If I don't do this action, how is it going to be in this context in my life, in this particular moment, right? So just if I can summarize a little bit, is watch the mind for whatever it becomes the mind, right? Watching the mind, you can visualize the thoughts, you can physicalize the thoughts, and you say things like, I am noticing my mind is telling me this. My mind is coming up with this thought. My heart is having butterflies, right? Noticing the mind is describing the experience of that. Then you may want to check here again, what are my values? You know, if I act on this thought, or the podcast going so well, is that consistent with my values? Right? Because if I act on the value, if I act on the thought that says the podcast won't go well, I may say, John Paul, I'm sorry, I have to reschedule. I couldn't make it, right? It will lead me to avoidance, right? So I have to ask ourselves, right? If I act on this action, is this consistent with my values or no? And the third one will be to check really the values. What's important to me here?
in terms of working through values for people, because actually on the course that I did, it's on my YouTube channel, and below one of the videos, they talk about values for people, and I have a values list so people can work through and tick what their values would be, but and also put them in order, say top 5, because prioritizing values can be important too if you've got so many different activities and choices, isn't it? You mentioned earlier making choices about different things. As far as values for you and the work you do with clients.
Yeah, that's such a great question. So there's one there are different ways to do this, right? I certainly have a list of values because it can be like this really big question for people. So I think having a list of values gives people a chance to choose what's important to them in different areas of their life. And I like to do a lot of experiential exercises, right? And I will tell you why. There is this concept that is derived from relational frame theory of language, which is like the research branch of acceptance and commitment therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about this process called pliance. And pliance means basically, pliance acknowledges that we're being shaped by cultural messages. So the best example I can have for you is that if you put a group of 10 sheiks together and you ask them, what do you like to do this work? They will say, because I love to help people, all of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the most common response.
Mm-hmm.
It could be true. It could be true. But we're not tapping into the individual uniqueness that we all have when doing this work,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think pliance prepare us to say the right thing based on the cultural values many times.
Sure.
So we want to be careful with that, right? So that is why for me, paying attention to that. And in my work, when I have a new client, I try to do 2 or 3 experiential exercises.
Mm-hmm.
For example, is your 80th birthday and your best friend is there, your partner is there, and they're giving a speech about what is important to you in your life now. Or for whatever reason, you only have 6 hours to be alive on this earth. What will you do with those 6 hours? It's a powerful question, right?
Yeah.
Or you have to write your own tombstone. What would you like the tombstone to do? So the reason is having experiential exercises are less minding for people and are less prone for clients. And we have to help people to distinguish that the value has nothing to do with how others treat us, right? But people will say, like, I want to be respected.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, well, do we have control of that?
Mm-hmm.
We can behave in ways, that will hopefully inspire people to respect us, but we don't have control of that, right? So values have nothing to do with societal expectations. What is unique about us is that we think about values as ongoing patterns of action, which basically means that we're always valuing, right? Every moment that we are alive, we're valuing in terms of how I want to show up to this moment. When I go to order a coffee shop, when I'm doing this interview, when I'm seeing my clients, right? And then we're never done with our values. We're done with goals and the actions that comes with the values.
We are sort of coming up to time, really, but thank you so much for you've talked about. It's been amazing how you've described all of these techniques. I think it's been so helpful and brought it to life as well with your personal experience and those sorts of things too. I mean, I do tend to ask a couple of questions just to finish off, one of which would be your advice to people coming into the profession. There's quite a lot of people that watch the channel who are thinking of being a therapist or they're training to be therapists. And I just wonder if there's a piece of advice that you would give to them. And the other one is a general piece of life advice. What's your favorite piece of life advice?
Yeah, that was such a great question. And I was thinking about it this week. For people coming into the field of mental health, whether that's through an MFT or social clinical worker or psychologist, I think my biggest advice will be hold on to your values. Hold on to your values. Because sometimes we all carry ways of defending ourselves, protecting ourselves. We all have our stuff to say, oh my gosh, it's not me, it's that person, it's that client. It's a human response. It's a human response. But I think we become better clinicians when we can really look within, hold on to the values. And if the value is to be a caring clinicians, that means that you have to look within. You cannot do this job without looking within. Sure. And sometimes looking within means that we will see, I don't want to go there. This is too painful, right? But that's where that growth happens, when we just can look within. So I think that will be the biggest thing, to learn to not hide from our own demons, because we all carry them in some way or another way, right? And it's easy to say, oh, it's the client resistant, the client is doing that, right? But really, can we humble to look, okay, what happened within me that I'm going there? What happened within me that I responded like that? Which story of my past is getting activated here, right? So I think I will encourage people that with compassion, not to criticize or shame people, but with compassion, acknowledging that to be human is absolutely hard. It's absolutely hard for all of us, for our clients and for ourselves. So that will be my 2 words of wisdom for people coming into the field.
Fantastic.
And for the general audience listening to us, I think I will repeat something that we say in our conversation. I will invite them to practice watching their mind. Watching their mind, what the mind tell us. Even when they are not doing anything and they're just laying down in TV, if they set a timer for 2 minutes and they watch what the mind says, right? The mind will say all types of things about the past, the present, the future, about themselves. The more that we learn to watch our mind, the more skillful we are at choosing what matters to us individually. Because the mind can be like very consuming, right? So I think it's a big skill. Watch the mind. And if the mind is telling you, you should do this, you should do that, ask yourself, if I engage in that behavior, does it help me to expand my life or to shrink it? Right? Really? And the response is very clear, expansion or shrinking. So asking that question. And the second thing is to expect that your mind is going to tell you all types of annoying things. Just noticing that your mind has a life on its own and that you have the one to make decisions. I think it's very, very different. That's what we trying skills for people to try. And if they are willing, I would love to hear how it goes for them to try these skills or any questions they have about our conversation, of course.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much for that. That's great. I mean, I'm going to put below links to anything and everything, I guess your books, website, anything else you'd like to put below here. I will do that for people. It's been amazing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on and good luck with everything else that you're doing.
Thank you so much again for having me. And I hope that with time we can do this again. I absolutely love how thoughtful you are on these episodes and all what you're doing in your YouTube channel. It's super cool.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that would be great. We'll do a part 2, most definitely.
Part two, when the time comes. When the time comes, yes. Awesome. Thank you so much again. And I wish you a lovely, lovely Saturday.